It all began on what I assumed would be a typical Monday morning. I had just returned from my night shift at the hospital, completely exhausted and desperate to collapse into bed. But as I pulled into my street, something caught my attention and stopped me in my tracks. A strange car was parked in my driveway. At first, I figured it was some kind of mix-up. Maybe a neighbor's guest didn't realize they were parked on private property. No big deal, right? Instead of losing my temper, I parked on the street, which, by the way, is a rare luxury in this neighborhood. I scribbled a polite note and slid it under the car's windshield wiper. "Hi there, just a heads up. This is a private driveway. Please don't park here." "Thanks." Feeling pretty good about my calm approach, I trudged inside, collapsed onto the couch, and quickly passed out. Little did I know my driveway drama was only just beginning. The next morning, I stepped outside to find the same car parked in my driveway, like an unwelcome guest who didn't know when to leave. My polite note? Crumpled up and shoved into the bushes. Cute. I sighed, grabbed a fresh piece of paper, and gave it another go. This time, my note was a little more direct. Private driveway. Do not park here. This is your final warning. Satisfied, I went about my day, assuming anyone with common sense would get the message. But when I came back from running errands, yep, you guessed it, the car was still there. I was officially done playing nice. The next morning, I decided it was time to confront the driver directly. I was prepared to be firm but polite, ready to lay down the law on property rights. But as I stood by the offending vehicle, the door to the house across the street swung open, and out stepped her. You know that feeling when you just know someone's trouble the moment you see them? That was Karen. She had the signature haircut, the aggressive march, and an air of entitlement so thick you could cut it with a knife. She saw me standing by her car and immediately barked, "What do you think you're doing by my car?" "Your car's?" I said, trying to stay calm. "It's in my driveway. You've been parking here for days, and I've already left 2 notes." She crossed her arms, a smug smirk creeping onto her face. "I only park here because street parking sucks. It's not like you use it all the time. What's the big deal?" "Oh, the big deal. Let me count the ways. My elderly father, who needs the driveway to get in and out safely, my wife who needs space when she gets home from work, and me, who just wants to sleep without worrying about having to park a mile away from my own house." But I kept it simple. This is private property. You can't just park here because it's convenient for you. Please move your car, and don't park here again. Karen let out a dramatic sigh, muttering something about selfish people before finally getting in her car and driving off. Victory, right? Wrong. 2 days later, I came home to find her car back in my driveway as if nothing had happened. This time, she parked in such a way that my wife couldn't even get out of the garage. Furious, I knocked on her door to confront her again. When she opened the door, she didn't even look surprised. "Oh, it's you," she said, as though I were the one causing trouble. "Yes, it's me," I replied, keeping my tone steady. "Your car is blocking my garage. Move it now." Karen rolled her eyes. "Look, I'm not going to argue with you every time I need to park somewhere." The driveway was empty. "What's the harm?" "The harm," I said through gritted teeth, "is that this is my driveway, not a public parking lot. Move your car." With a dramatic sigh, Karen stomped over to her car like I'd just asked her to run a marathon. As she backed out of the driveway, she shouted, "You're ridiculous." "It's just a driveway." I wanted to shout back, "It's not just a driveway, it's my driveway." But I bit my tongue for now. A week passed without incident, and I thought maybe Karen had finally gotten the message. But one fateful Saturday morning, I woke up to find not only her car in my driveway, but a second car parked behind it. She'd invited a friend to join in on the fun. That was it. I snapped a photo of both cars, called a tow truck, and waited. Watching the tow truck hook up both cars was one of the most satisfying moments of my life. As the truck pulled away, I couldn't help but smile. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of Karen's epic meltdown. I don't know what I expected when Karen found out her car was gone, but the spectacle she created was beyond anything I could have imagined. I was sitting on my porch enjoying a cup of coffee when I saw her marching down the street, phone glued to her ear. She looked absolutely livid, her face redder than a sunburn, and her purse swinging wildly with each step. She stomped up to my driveway, looked around, and then began pacing back and forth like a detective at a crime scene. Finally, she spotted me sitting there. "You," she shouted, jabbing her finger at me. "Where's my car?" I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the moment, before responding, "Oh, your car? It got towed." Her jaw dropped. "You towed my car?" "Sure did," I said, setting my mug down. "You were parked on my private property again." Her reaction was, well, let's just say, it wasn't measured. She threw her hands in the air, let out a dramatic wail, and began pacing even faster. "You had no right to tow my car. None. This is harassment. I'm calling the police," she yelled. I leaned back in my chair, utterly unfazed. "Go ahead, I'll wait." To my utter delight, Karen actually called the police. Since I had nothing better to do that day, I decided to stick around and see how this played out. About 20 minutes later, a patrol car pulled up. 2 officers stepped out, looking mildly annoyed, as if they already knew they were about to deal with some nonsense. Karen ran up to them, waving her arms like she was directing a plane to land. "Officers," she shouted, pointing at me as though I were a wanted fugitive. "That man right there had my car towed for no reason. He's been harassing me, and I demand you arrest him." The officers turned to me, eyebrows raised. "Is this true?" one asked. "Not even a little bit," I replied, standing up. "She's been parking in my driveway without permission for weeks. I've warned her multiple times. When she ignored me, I called a tow truck. I've got photos, videos, and a copy of the tow receipt if you'd like to see them." Karen's face fell, but she wasn't ready to give up. "He's lying," she screeched. "It's just a driveway. You can't tow someone for parking in it." The officer held up a hand to stop her. "Ma'am, a private driveway is private property. If you park there without permission, he's well within his rights to have your car towed." Karen gasped, as though I'd just told her she was banned from Starbucks for life. "But I live here. I'm part of this neighborhood." "He's being unreasonable," she yelled. The second officer turned to her, clearly trying to keep his patience. "Ma'am, do you have any proof that you were allowed to park there?" Karen opened her mouth, closed it, and then opened it again, but no words came out. She looked like a fish gasping for air. "That's what I thought," the officer said. "This is a civil matter, not a criminal one. You'll need to pay the towing fees to retrieve your car. And I suggest you stop parking in his driveway." If looks could kill, I would have dropped dead on the spot. Karen glared at me with enough fury to power the entire neighborhood, but there was nothing she could do. The officers got back in their car and left, and Karen stomped off in the opposite direction, muttering something about making me pay. For about a week, I thought that was the end of it. Karen's car was nowhere to be seen, and I foolishly allowed myself to believe she had finally learned her lesson. But Karen, being Karen, wasn't done yet. One morning, I walked outside to find a letter taped to my front door. It was handwritten, in Karen's neat but aggressive script, and it read, "Dear neighbor, you've made things very difficult for me with your petty and selfish actions. I've spoken to other neighbors, and we all agree you're creating unnecessary conflict by refusing to share your driveway. As a member of this community, I expect you to be more accommodating in the future. If you don't want to cooperate, I'll have no choice but to escalate this matter. Sincerely, Karen." I couldn't help but laugh. The idea that Karen was trying to recruit allies against me was so absurd, it almost felt like a comedy sketch. I decided to do some investigating of my own. That evening, I went around to ask a few of my neighbors if Karen had, in fact, rallied them to her side. As it turned out, most of them were just as fed up with her as I was. "She came by last week," one neighbor said. "Kept going on about how unfair you were being, but honestly, I don't blame you. She's parked in my driveway before, too." "Yeah," another chimed in. "She's always causing trouble. Last month, she complained to the HOA because my kids were too noisy playing in the backyard. By the time I got home, I had a pretty good sense of where the neighborhood stood. Karen's allies didn't exist. If anything, she was on thin ice." After realizing that her neighbors weren't rallying behind her, Karen decided to take matters into her own hands. Well, more like into her clipboard. One sunny Saturday morning, I walked outside to find Karen standing at the end of my driveway, holding what looked like a petition. She was stopping anyone who passed by, talking animatedly, and gesturing toward my house. "Excuse me, what are you doing?" I asked, crossing my arms. Karen spun around, her face lighting up with fake sweetness that could rot your teeth. "Oh, hello. I'm just collecting signatures for a neighborhood petition. We're trying to address some issues with inconsiderate homeowners." "Inconsiderate homeowners?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. Karen gave me a tight smile. "You specifically?" I couldn't help but laugh. "You're circulating a petition about me? For what? Enforcing my property rights?" "You've been hostile and uncooperative," she snapped. "This is a community, and we're supposed to work together. But no, you had my car towed, like some kind of tyrant. People like you shouldn't even live here if you can't get along with your neighbors." "Oh, really?" I said, leaning against the mailbox. "How's the petition going so far?" Karen hesitated, clutching her clipboard a little tighter. "It's going great. Everyone agrees with me." "Aha. Mind if I take a look?" I asked, pointing at the clipboard. "Absolutely not," she snapped, holding it behind her back. "This is private. Kind of like my driveway," I quipped. Karen sputtered, clearly caught off guard. "You're impossible." "Just wait," she said. "You'll see how many people are on my side." With that, she stomped off down the street, leaving me shaking my head. A few days later, I got a text from my next-door neighbor, Sarah. "Hey, Karen just came by with some ridiculous petition about your driveway. Thought you'd want to know." Apparently, Karen had been pestering everyone within a 3-block radius, trying to get them to sign her petition. Her argument boiled down to this: I was unreasonable for not letting her park in my driveway, and the neighborhood should collectively encourage me to be more accommodating. But here's the kicker: not a single person had signed it. "She's been parking in other people's driveways too," Sarah said when I stopped by to chat. "She tried to frame it like you were the problem, but everyone knows how entitled she is." Honestly, we're all sick of her. Hearing that was music to my ears. Not only was Karen's smear campaign failing spectacularly, but now the entire neighborhood was firmly on my side. I thought Karen might give up after the petition debacle, but I underestimated her commitment to being the absolute worst. One evening, I came home to find something truly unbelievable. Karen had dragged 2 orange traffic cones and a cheap plastic "no parking" sign into my driveway. She'd set them up in a neat little barricade, complete with a hand-drawn note taped to the sign that read, "This driveway is now reserved for community use. Violators will be reported." I stared at the scene for a solid minute, wondering if I had somehow wandered into an alternate dimension where Karen actually owned the universe. Then I burst out laughing. "Oh, she's lost it," my wife said when I showed her the scene. I snapped a few photos, removed the cones and sign, and tossed them onto Karen's lawn. Then I called the police non-emergency line to report the incident, just in case she tried to escalate further. After Karen's community driveway stunt, I decided it was time to put an end to this nonsense once and for all. I got in touch with the HOA and explained everything that had been going on. They took the situation seriously and sent Karen a formal letter warning her that her behavior could result in fines or even legal action if she continued to park in my driveway. Karen didn't take kindly to the letter. She went door to door, complaining to anyone who would listen about the HOA's unfair treatment. But after the HOA got involved, she stopped parking in my driveway. Finally, after weeks of harassment, the saga ended. But I have to say, there's something deeply satisfying about watching Karen finally get her comeuppance. And as for me, I can sleep soundly knowing that I've got my driveway back and that I've won against the worst neighbor I'll ever have.